Imagine a world where your freedom is not a given, but a luxury. This was the reality for millions throughout history, trapped in the chains of slavery. It's a grim chapter of our past that we must confront to understand the present and shape a better future. Slavery is not a new phenomenon. It's as old as civilization itself, emerging with the first societies that understood the concept of property. The ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia, Greece, and Rome all practiced forms of slavery, exploiting those captured in wars or punishing those who couldn't repay their debts. But when we speak of slavery, we often refer to a particularly egregious chapter in human history, the transatlantic slave trade. This was not the first instance of slavery, nor was it the last, but it was undoubtedly one of the most brutal and widespread. From the 16th to the 19th centuries, an estimated 12 to 15 million African men, women, and children were forcibly transported to the Americas. The transatlantic slave trade was a business of unimaginable scale, driven by the European colonizers' insatiable hunger for wealth and resources. The journey across the Atlantic, known as the Middle Passage, was a horrifying ordeal. Packed into the dank, cramped holds of ships, many captives did not survive the voyage. Those who did were sold into a life of hard labor, stripped of their names, their cultures, and their humanity. This was not just an act of physical coercion, but a systematic attempt to dehumanize and commodify human beings. And this immense suffering was not an aberration. It was the engine that drove the economic growth of the colonial powers. The echoes of these millions of lost lives continue to reverberate through history. The legacy of the transatlantic slave trade is still felt today in the deep social, economic, and racial disparities that persist in many parts of the world. As we delve deeper into this dark past, we begin to see the outlines of our present, and perhaps the path to a more just future. The pursuit of power and wealth has often come at a great human cost. Pivoting our lens to the economic underpinnings of slavery and colonialism, we delve into the murky waters of profit and exploitation. In the age of exploration and the subsequent colonial era, the thirst for wealth and power was insatiable. The discovery of new lands ripe with resources was a siren's call to European powers. Nations like England, Spain, Portugal, and France embarked on a race to establish colonies, driven by the potential for immense wealth. The indigenous peoples of these lands were seen not as fellow humans, but as obstacles to be removed or resources to be exploited. In the Americas, the vast plantations of sugarcane, cotton, and tobacco became the backbone of colonial economies. These industries were labor-intensive and required a large workforce to operate. Enslaved Africans were seen as the solution to this labor problem. They were forcibly transported across the Atlantic, stripped of their identities, and condemned to lives of servitude. In mining, too, the story was no different. The indigenous peoples of South America were forced to work in brutal conditions in the silver mines of Potosi and the gold mines of Brazil. Their labor fueled the European economy, filling the coffers of the colonial powers. As the profits from these industries swelled, so did the demand for more enslaved labor. The transatlantic slave trade became a lucrative business in itself, with traders selling human lives for hefty profits. But the cost of this wealth was immense. Millions of lives were lost or irrevocably altered. Families were torn apart, cultures destroyed, and human beings reduced to commodities in a ruthless economic machine. This was the true price of the wealth amassed in the colonial era. In the grand scheme of wealth and power, human lives were reduced to mere commodities. The profits reaped were soaked in blood and tears, a testament to the human capacity for cruelty when blinded by greed. As we continue to uncover the truth about slavery and colonialism, we must never forget the human cost of these profits of pain. Even in the darkest of times, the human spirit fights for freedom. As the brutal institution of slavery stretched its malevolent tendrils across the globe, the desire for liberty sparked an indomitable spirit of resistance among the enslaved peoples. This resistance took many forms, but all shared a common goal: freedom from the shackles of oppression. In the sugar plantations of the Caribbean, cotton fields of the American South, and mines of South America, enslaved Africans fought back against their oppressors. They employed various tactics, from the subtle to the overt. Sabotage was a common form of resistance. Slaves would accidentally break tools, burn crops, or feign illness to disrupt the flow of work and inflict economic damage on their masters. Escape was another path to freedom. many slaves risked their lives to flee their captors, embarking on perilous journeys towards liberty. Along the way, they formed maroon communities, secluded settlements of escaped slaves, where they could live free from the yoke of slavery. But perhaps the most powerful form of resistance was overt rebellion. Throughout the history of slavery, there were numerous uprisings, but none were as significant as the Haitian Revolution. Led by the determined and charismatic Toussaint Louverture, an army of slaves rose up against their French oppressors in the late 18th century. After a grueling and bloody struggle, they emerged victorious, abolishing slavery and establishing Haiti as an independent nation. This was a groundbreaking event, sending shockwaves across the Atlantic world and inspiring other enslaved peoples to rise up against their masters. These acts of resistance, these fights for freedom, were not just about breaking chains. They were about reclaiming humanity, dignity, and self-determination. They were about challenging a system that sought to dehumanize and commodify them. They were about redefining themselves not as property, but as people. The chains of slavery could not quell the burning desire for freedom. This burning desire fueled the fight against slavery, lighting the way towards liberation and justice. It's a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity, a spirit that continues to inspire us in our ongoing struggle against oppression and injustice. While slavery and colonialism may be history, their impacts are far from over. These two dark chapters have left profound imprints on societies around the globe. Long after the shackles were broken and the colonies liberated, the legacies of these historical phenomena continue to shape contemporary realities. From the Americas to Africa, from Asia to the Pacific, every region touched by the scourge of slavery and the yoke of colonialism bears the weight of their past. The social fabric in these regions has been irrevocably altered. Economically, the gap between the exploited and the exploiters has only widened, with patterns of inequality persisting over generations. Culturally, the pain of lost identities and uprooted traditions lingers, even as societies strive to reclaim their heritage. These are the unseen scars of slavery and colonialism. They are deep, they are painful, and they remind us of the human capacity for cruelty, but also for resilience, resistance, and the quest for justice. The scars of slavery and colonialism, though unseen, remain deep and painful. Slavery and colonialism are not just relics of the past, but realities of the present. Today, we see the persistence of these troubling phenomena in various forms. Human trafficking, a hidden crime that affects millions worldwide, is a grim reminder of the human capacity for exploitation. Forced labor, another modern-day chain, traps countless individuals in situations of servitude, stripping them of their freedoms and dignity. Racial discrimination, too, is a lingering ghost of our colonial past. It manifests in systemic injustices and disparities that disproportionately impact racial and ethnic minorities. These modern chains are not as visible as the iron shackles of the past, but they are just as real and just as binding. The fight against oppression and exploitation continues, and it's one we must all partake in. By understanding the past, recognizing the present, and striving for a better future, we can hope to break these chains and truly set humanity free.